So my name is Khaleeq, and my partner here, teammate with me is Melissa, and we are from Singapore Polytechnic. So today our group will present about our City Hall Heritage Trail if walls could talk. So what we will be going through is the reasons for interest in trail, the history of the place, report of someone familiar with the place, reflection of chosen artifact, some wonder questions, and any stream will be citations. So here are the list of reasons why we are interested in this trail. So firstly, if we are interested in this trail, we will need to the information needed for this trail is basically the history, the facts behind it, and its impact on Singapore. So I wish to gather information on the history of the place, how it plays a role in Singapore politics, and the development of Singapore and how it has impacted Singapore to this day. This trail interests me as I'm keen to know more about City Hall surrounding and City Hall and how it has changed over the past few years. Besides that, I'm also curious about how City Hall has managed to be conserved despite challenges faced during post-independence. Through an immersive multimedia experience, the exhibition tells the lesser-known stories of pivotal moments that occur within the walls of this grand dame across its history. I was also motivated to find out why the City Hall is important to Singapore and its history.
So, for the history of City Hall, it was formerly known as the Municipal Building and has had a rich and colorful history since its completion in 1929. It was occupied by the Japanese authorities during World War II, who later held their surrender ceremony there in 1945. It was on the same steps of the building that Mr. Lee Kuan Yew recited the Proclamation of Malaysia on September 16, 1963, declaring the formation of the Federation of Malaysia with Singapore as the member state and signifying the end of the British colonial rule on the island.
I interviewed
Miss Pang Lee can you to work at the City Hall's publicity division. For the impression of City Hall, visitors will just see the frontage as compared to workers building the building which brings life. City Hall forged important government policies as well as lifelong friendships and fond memories. Thus, I have learned that the heritage of City Hall is not only built on nationwide events and artifacts, but also individual memories. Thus, the small happenings in the City Hall has added up to meaningful events. Similarly, the importance of heritage ranges from national history to personal awareness. As heritage tells the history, we are also able to learn the emotions from the stories as well as values which add to one's character. After the interview, I've decided to take my future visits to City Hall seriously so that I can appreciate the heritage and feel more responsible as a citizen. I'll also be thinking back on the fond memories of going to exhibitions with my secondary school classmates and how it has contributed to the heritage. It is truly amazing to find out that the City Hall has a deeper meaning than it seems from its walls to its heritage.
So I interviewed Mr. Roger Tan. So he used to work at Public Service Commission and Public Service Division in City Hall. So one of the question I asked was about working environment, and he tells me that the police guard, his working environment was surrounded with police guard man the entrance, and very transition from the very old colonial majestic facade to a modern office inside. So one of the memories he had was he would normally have gatherings with his colleagues to celebrate each other's birthday, during parties, potlucks, like a family, like its atmosphere at the PSC. So his relationship with colleagues was that he is still in touch with them through annual gatherings, and he is keeping ties alive with them through WhatsApp groups. So my reflection is that I think that such places should be conserved as it will bring back memories to people and it will allow the future people to learn lessons from the past. So one reflection of my chosen artifact is the painting of Singapore Waterfront. So I'll give a brief history of Singapore Waterfront. So it was completed in the early 1960s. It depicts iconic spots in the city centre such as the Fullerton Building, Clifford Pier and Singapore River. These spots are emblematic of the movement, migration and connection. It used to be a trading port by the British East Indian Company. The physical landscape reflects the changes and development of Singapore from a fledgling port city into a major 21st century metropolis. The waterfront served as a point of entry for visitors as well as immigrants seeking a better future. It was an important landing point for the loading and unloading of various goods that were traded through Singapore. So I was actually quite impressed with this chosen artifact, as it shows the beautiful side of Singapore past, as many are not aware of Singapore history. In addition to that, it also shows how this place has allowed trading to happen in the past and how Singapore has developed over the past few years. It also shows how a small country can be transformed into a regional hub, and it shows as Singapore is able to develop despite gaining independence, which will cause more issues to derive.
I have chosen to research on an artwork titled Interrupted Road Surveying in Singapore. This print is based on an incident in 1835 where colonial architect J.D. Coleman and a group of Indian convict laborers were attacked by a tiger while constructing a new road through the jungle. As one of the earliest existing works that shows construction being carried out in colonial Singapore, it stands in contrast with the remote, extensive vistas often depicted in topographical paintings of early 19th century Singapore. The significance of the incident was the fact that it shows what colonial Singapore looks like, which is an uncommon sight. I viewed Singapore as a clean and modern city, a first world country that is known for its technological advancements. In contrast, infrastructure such as kampongs are often overlooked despite their cultural and historical value. Hence, I found it eye-opening to experience the humble beginnings of Singapore, when there were villages, more jungles, and more wild animals. Therefore, this image is highly in contrast to the current Singapore, which depicts the great progress Singapore has developed. I have realized that I am not familiar with the beginnings of Singapore, so I am influenced to share the story with my peers and family so that they could learn about this incident as well. Conservation of the City Hall and hence conservation of this painting would help me and future generations be reminded of Singapore's roots and pick interest to gain knowledge of Singapore's history, not just on main historical events, but also the lesser known stories. Similarly, I think conservation will also allow for current Singaporeans to look back on such artifacts and reinforce their memories of historical events Singapore has gone through. All in all, it will help to improve our national identity and encourage the conservation of heritage and appreciate culture.
So here are the list of wonder questions I had. Firstly, why isn't any development being done to the area? Secondly, what can Singaporeans do to retain the values of the past leader? Thirdly, how did the government ensure the development of Singapore remains smooth despite problems arising? And lastly, how did the Declaration of Independence take place within City Hall?
For my questions, if the City Hall building were not present during the times of war, how would the people be affected? Seeing how so many important events in the history of Singapore was carried out in the City Hall, will there be a possibility of future generations not visiting the City Hall? Why or why will not? Is it possible for people to view or have viewed the City Hall building in a negative light and why? We have come to the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening. And here is our bibliography.